I was on Facebook, scrolling through Facebook, and I seen a tweet from Mark Berman. Right, I didn't even know. I hadn't known because I'd been out, doing stuff all day. I didn't even know that Charles Oakley went on ESPN this morning and commented on the entire situation. Right, and in this situation, he basically says that MSGs ran like a plantation. Okay, and that something needs to be done about it because it's being ran like a plantation. And it just triggered me because I wasn't trying to do any videos on this whole thing because I thought it was childish, so I didn't want to, just do a separate video. But I was like, you know what? I want to comment on this. And this is the comment that I made. This was, kind of in short. I didn't go as deep as I would have liked to have gone, but I want to talk about it here. Right? I said this. I said, I didn't want to comment or do anything on the Spike Lee stuff, but I feel compelled based on what Charles Oakley said. He said, I'm tired of hearing NFL and NBA leagues, etc., being compared to slavery. It's utterly ridiculous. These athletes get paid millions to play a game, literally a game, right? On top of their millions, they get endorsements and they get carte blanche. They get carte blanche, almost a lot of them, the big name people, even some of the no-name guys still kind of get carte blanche. They fly on private jets to games, equipped with amenities. They get food that, despite all the money that they make, they still don't have to pay for. Food before the game, food after the game, food during halftime if they need it, food on the jet, food on the train, food on the bus. That's paid for by the organization, paid for by the fans, right? If they don't like the owner of the team, they can choose to quit at any time. They can choose to quit. They can choose to quit. They don't have to worry about being chased by a slave catcher. They don't have to worry about going to jail for escaping slavery. They don't have to worry about walking into a building, walking into a store, and having somebody say, let me see your papers. They don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. They can use the money that they make. They can use that money. They can change their careers. They can start a business. They can choose to further their education. They can do all of these things. Mm-hmm. All of these things. You know what I'm saying? I mean, now tell me, what slave had these freedoms? What slave had these freedoms? They did not. You know what I'm saying? And it just bothers me when people compare it. I understand what they're saying, but it bothers me when they compare it. Because to me, I feel like this, right? If you believe that these sports leagues are akin to a slavery, akin to a plantation, right? If you actually feel that, then stop watching. Don't go to the games. Don't buy the uniforms. Don't buy the jerseys. Don't buy the hats. Don't do any of it. Because if you actually feel that it is like slavery and you are watching it, then you are just as guilty because you're participating in it. That's how I feel about it. You know what I'm saying? It's just ridiculous. And I hate when people say that because, if you want to talk about comparing something to slavery, let's talk about mass incarceration, right? Compare that to slavery because that is slavery. Right, let's talk about the prison complex, the prison industry. Let's talk about the prison industry, right? And how they use black and brown people that's in prison for cheap labor or less than cheap labor. Right? And what they get, $2 put on their commissary per hour or something like that. Huh. Right? Let's talk about that. Let's not compare 15 players in the NBA getting paid no less than $1 million per season or $2 million per season, whatever the league minimum is, slavery. When you can choose to get up at any moment. You can be in the middle of a game. You can walk to the locker room and go home. The most you're going to have to do is give some money back.
Again, go back to all the slavery times, Arabic slavery, where they'll kill the man. They would, excuse my language, they'll rape and brutalize the women and the children. Jamaican slavery, buck breaking, raping the slaves. American transatlantic slavery, as all the ills you just mentioned, slavery in Brazil. Even go to even what's happened. It's not necessarily slavery, because it's akin to it. What's happened to King Leopold, the Belgian, when they took over? I think it was now I'm running out of, it was a Congo, whatever, where they'll cut people's arms if they didn't do certain services. If I went back and asked any of those victims before any of those things were going to happen to them, would you rather have this, or would you rather sit at a stadium with popcorn, food, and watch entertainment? 10 times out of 10, they're going to take the latter versus the former. So to sit there and compare it to what people have gone through, where people have lost their culture, their identity, their sanity, and say that's slavery, it's an embarrassment. It's even embarrassment. I think if it was ESPN that had this interview, it's an embarrassment that they actually aired this. This should have been cut off or whatever. Whoever had this platform, it should have cut off. And Spike Lee, you're a big walking hypocrite. You talk about everybody else having privilege, but you use your privilege literally to get to box or to get to front court seats to enjoy a game. So you can't say and talk about all this. And you sat there and you want to be arrested for what? So it gives you publicity for what? There are people now, I know people now that they are, not say they're scared of police or they're whatever, not say they don't respect it, but if they had a situation, they'd probably be emotional. But when they run into police and it doesn't entail them being arrested or anything out of the norm, they're not going to sit there and tell the police, oh, okay, the police give us a ticket. Arrest me now. Arrest me. I don't get an effort. They're not going to do that. So all this thing that Spike is doing is all for show. He's an opportunist. He's using real race relationships, racial situations in this country to kind of galvanize and say, oh yeah, I'm a victim, I'm this and that. Him and Oakley, it's like there's these two idiotic opportunists and they both look bad. Now, if James Dolan told us on the day of, okay, that's not cool, James Dolan. At least tell me ahead of time. But if he's been telling you this stuff for how many months or weeks and you're not following it, and then you shook hands with them and you settled it, and that's that, and you're still in the court, like Isaiah said, that you're still there. If someone abused you, harassed you, you're still in the court enjoying a courtside seats. Come on, bro.
Yeah,
this is garbage, man.
Yeah, and like, you know, it was Charles Oakley who brought up the plantation thing. I don't know if Spike did that, but even if they told him the day of, bro, it's an entrance. It is an entrance. Just use the other entrance. Use the VIP entrance. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, this whole thing that I think Larry Johnson, way back in the day, a long time ago, in the 90s, was one of the first people. I don't know if he was one of the first people that brought it up, but one of the first people to say it in public, in an interview, you know, that, you know, the NBA is like slavery, and playing for an NBA team is like being in a plantation. And I think at the time Larry Johnson was part of the Nation of Islam. You know what I'm saying? Even then, at that time, I was like, you got it wrong. You know what I'm saying? And I just it is so disrespectful to me when you look at it, when you're talking about a people, like you said, that lost their culture, lost their religion, lost their language. You know what I'm saying? And is now stuck in this generational oppression that is not just oppression of, you know, someone holding you down physically, but now is a generational oppression that is part of the makeup of your brain now, right? It's part of the makeup of your mind. You know, and people just don't get it. People don't understand when you talk about fathers not being with black children in black communities. Why do you think that came from? It came from slavery. You talk about generations of, you know, slave masters selling off the fathers, selling off fathers, right? Selling off the buck. That's what they call them. Selling off the buck, right? Instead of now the mother's there to raise the children. You know what I'm saying? Selling off the buck, and then and this happens generation after generation. And then you got the Civil War, where fathers, you know, black fathers went to fight the war for America. Right, and then when finally slavery is abolished, right? Now you have the whole mass incarceration, right? Where because it's still, you know, the law is that, you know, you can't be enslaved unless you have been convicted of a crime, right? if you're convicted of a crime and you are imprisoned, then you can be treated as a slave. That's basically what it turns out
they
to
basically
be
just
said in
converted it.
in the 13th Amendment. That's basically what it says. You can't be, one person cannot own another person. You cannot be enslaved unless you are convicted of a crime, right? And so now that gives you the whole, that gives, white America then, and white America today, the whole reason to say, well, okay, so we can't own you and have you in slavery, but we can find a way to make you a criminal. Then we can imprison you, and then we can give you all this work that we want you to do so that we can make money off of your back.
Yep.
And you still can't go anywhere. We still have you imprisoned, and we still have you under our control. Right? So now you got all these fathers away there. Right? And this is generation after generation after generation. And every generation, the importance of a father gets lessened and lessened and lessened. Right? And that's just one aspect. That's just one thing that I'm pointing out. And obviously, there's so many.
There's so many levels, Sim, before you even consider a game being oppressive. Think about this: the NBA they're playing today is not even as tough as the NBA that they're playing back then in the day when they were getting paid $50,000 a year. Basically, they had to work a job in the summer. The NBA is not even that tough. These guys are literally getting paid what working class people would hope they could get paid for the rest of their lives in a span of 1 to 2 years in terms of what the NBA players are getting. Some of these guys are getting paid, right? Yeah. I just get sick when I hear politicians, when I hear dumb celebrities, or celebrities, period. When they use these terms, they use these what do they call it? Keywords, not keywords, but these trigger words. Right? Because then it invokes stuff.
Entertainers and athletes always go the plantation/slave route whenever they feel like they've been wronged. But the thing that bugs me out is that they never take the time out to make their own league. Even if you get 2 or 3 guys together and say, hey, let's put the plan together. Let's make a 100-year plan. This doesn't have to come into fruition with us. It could be coming to fruition with our children, our children's children, children's children, so on and so forth. Nobody's ever, at least as far as I know, that's not happening, right? So I don't, and it's the same thing with entertainers, especially Hollywood. And I always say this about Hollywood actors, or people who work within the industry in general. They don't have, and which is something that's much easier to actually produce, especially today. You can make your own Hollywood, but it hasn't happened because it can't. It hasn't happened because they don't want to. They want to have somebody be able to bring out a limo for them, bring food, a jet, whatever kind of transportation, so on and so forth, all the little amenities that come with that.
And I just wanted to point out the fact that anytime there's a moment where a person, especially a person of color, because it's not always even a racial thing, sometimes it's just a classism thing, right? Anytime you see economically that people are being devalued, even when there's a fiscal calculable value that they bring to an entity, even when there's laws and practices and traditions set in place where somebody brings in a certain amount of value and they start to gain a bit more equity and power within the structure. When you see these tendencies get violated, and you do see people look like they're not afraid to look like they do bad business, that is because of remnants of how this country was founded. Like when you exercise power over another person like that, to the point where they have to speak out or try to fight for it, that is exactly what's happening. There are several remnants of slavery and times immediately after slavery, right, that show up in our economic systems today. There's a reason why people who serve in restaurants depend on tips to get by. And that itself is rooted in the fact that it used to be a slave job to be a server because it was a service job. And they used to justify not paying them because of their race by saying, "Oh, that's okay. Like you just go and you give great service, and they'll tip you enough money for you to get by because they're rich and you're poor, and we made it that way." So I don't understand what is so strange about pointing out the parallels that take place now. Of course, the power is diminished in being able to harm these bodies, but when you see people exercising unjust power over another that they would not exercise against somebody who is not of that race usually, or they do exercise against somebody of that race because that person is not as powerful as they are. That is because of this entitlement to power over others that is absolutely a remnant of that. And so we are in an age now, and I'm almost done. I'm sorry to ramble.
But hold on, but I just want to jump in for 1 second, Savvy, because to me, the thing is this. If you don't like the system that you're in, like any job in America, right, besides like human trafficking, which is slavery, okay? I'm talking about if you get paid to do a job, whether you get paid through tips, whether you get paid a wage, if you do not like it, you have the ability to walk up and leave. You can walk out of your job. The only consequence is that you won't get paid the next day.
Okay.
Right?
And I understand that point, and I don't disagree with that point, but here's what I'm going to say, right? At this point, centuries later, right, we could look at the history of the economy and the history of industrialization and deindustrialization, right, where it's gotten to a point where opportunities are controlled. There's no accidental money being made, at least not between the time that of the Industrial Revolution and the time of the dawn of the internet. There was no accidental money being made. Okay. You can make exceptions because of the drug boom. You can make exceptions because of prohibition and things like that. But by and large, if you're making money, people know how much you're making, what you're making, and somebody is in charge of that and in control of that. And it is through those mechanisms that they are able to exercise their power. Now, of course, you can walk out and you can go somewhere else, but tell me something. How many industries are controlled by us? Like, just specifically us? Very few, if any.
True.
Okay. So anywhere you go, you will encounter somebody who, at the very best, has to try and sit and listen and imagine what you're going through in order to treat you and consider you in a way that is free of those perceptual filters that get tacked on through socialization that people aren't even conscious of in the moment all the time. You don't have to be a racist white man to oppress somebody through the mechanisms of racism. You just have to be someone who is bought into the system and is playing the game, because the system and the game itself is built a certain way to lend itself towards certain outcomes. So you're right. You can leave, right? And hopefully you do find another job, and maybe you even build your own business. But if you don't, okay, the consequences are steep, because it is not legal to be poor. There are a lot of financial penalties written into the law that punish poverty. And the further you get down that hole, the easier it is to incarcerate you. And we all know the 13th Amendment does not outlaw slavery. It only makes it legal through a very slim margin of possibility where you are being punished for a crime.
Right. We talked about that earlier.
So if being poor, it becomes a crime, and you become poor, you are getting closer and closer to that snare that traps you in and brings you into the system as a state-owned slave, who also, by the way, are taxed for their wages, the little bit of wages that they do make for the labor.
Right. But to me, and I agree with what you're saying, right, that there are forms of oppression still in America through our through our economy, right? Through socialization. All right, there are definite forms of oppression, but still, even when it comes down to crime, you have a choice, and you are free to make that choice.
Okay, and fair enough.
You are free to make that choice.
I'll bring it to this. What is so bad about people speaking out about it?
Speaking out about, I don't agree with. Here's the thing. You're talking about somebody being, and I understand everything that you're saying about a person being, in a sense, you can say it is a crime to be poor. We're not talking about men who are poor. We're talking about men who the minimum wage they can make is $1 million a year. We're not talking about somebody being poor. We're talking about someone, if they chose to leave the NBA, many of them will be set for generations anyway. And they have the money to go out and further their education. They have the money to go out and start businesses, right? So we're not talking about someone who is in a lower socioeconomic, who is on a low socioeconomic level. We are talking about men and women. Not women as much, right? The WNBA, they don't make a lot of money. So we'll keep it to the NBA, the NFL. Right. We're talking about men who are making millions of dollars. What is the minimum income in the NBA? What's the minimum wage? The minimum salary.
It's got to be somewhere near $300,000 or something, right? Last time I checked, I think it was somewhere around there, right?
Well, if you get a guaranteed contract, it's like $1.8 million if you have a guaranteed NBA contract. You get a 10-day contract, for $100,000. A 10-day contract, $100,000. I mean, these people are making money, like Guillermo said, that someone who is actually poor may not make in their lifetime. So when we talk about the NBA and the NFL, and we talk about those systems there, that is nothing like what you're saying as far as a waiter or a waitress, who is working for tips, and maybe they don't have the education, and based on the background and the history of their family, right, and the education that's taken place over the generation of their family, they feel like they're stuck, and they've been taught that, this is the level, this is the class that I am at, so I'm going to stay in this class. Okay, so they decide to be a waiter or a waitress, and they're working for tips. They're not making a lot of money. We're not talking about those people. We're talking about men who are making millions of dollars.